What is the most memorable moment you shared with a stranger who you never saw again? I was in an ice cream store with a few friends, and I made eye contact with some random guy walking to the counter. For some reason, neither of us broke eye contact, and for those few seconds he made an incredibly goofy face, to which I responded with another goofy face. For the rest of the time we were in there, him and I didn't even look at each other again. I crashed a wedding when I was 18 because it was on my bucket list and ended up dancing with a woman who was maybe 24-25. Her name was Natalie. We danced for a couple songs, then the DJ put on a slow song. And I was thinking in my head, that's my cue to leave, but I have this habit of when I think I shouldn't do something because of negative thought, I just say frick it and do it. So I grabbed her hand and we slow danced. I didn't know anything about this woman beyond her name, and here I was slow dancing. After that I bounced because people were starting to look at me funny suspiciously, so I left without saying goodbye. Honestly, I look back and think I wonder what Natalie is doing. This was in October of 2013, and honestly that was the first time I said frick it and did what my heart wanted instead of my head. Life has been better ever since. When I was 16 I had to go to the hospital. I don't remember how it happened, but I started talking to a guy in a wheelchair. His name was Harvey. He looked a bit like Jerry Lewis, was in his 40s and told me he has brain cancer and only a few months to live. We talked for about an hour and at the end he gave me some advice. He said, don't whine about anything. Whining gets you nowhere. Either do something about it, and if you can't, try to accept it. I never forgot that. That was almost 30 years ago. Harvey, sometimes I whine but I try to keep it short. Thanks for that nice conversation. I was at a play barn and shot a foam tennis ball out of a compressed air cannon directly into the barrel of the cannon on the opposite side, about 60 feet away. The kid operating the cannon was amazed and shot the ball directly back at me, hitting me in the head. We both looked at each other like WTF. Air docking. As a teenager, I caught a bus into town. An old chap took the one free seat next to me and somehow we started chatting. He started telling me how he took part in a battle during World War II where he was one of only a handful of survivors. It was fascinating listening to him, especially being an army brat myself. I wish I could have spent longer on the bus with him and remembered more of the conversation, but it's lived with me now for 35 years. Little did he know, while in the middle of the dirt and smoke and noise and death all around, that one day he'd be sitting in safety on a bus telling you about it. I was in Darlington, England the day the ash cloud hit the UK. I was supposed to be flying back to Northern Ireland. Instead I decided to get the train to Scotland and then the ferry across. I missed a connection in Kilmarnock with another traveller. She was the owner of a chain of shops here. We had dinner together in a random pub and caught the next train to the ferry port. Never spoke again. I met a well-dressed older gentleman at a train station in London. He struck up a conversation about the departures board, and being a 20-year-old woman I was hesitant to talk back, but I like chatting to people and decided to keep the convo going. He ended up being extremely easy to talk to. I ended up telling him I was waiting for a train to take me to the airport so I could see my boyfriend in Hong Kong whom I hadn't seen for months. And he ended up telling me all about his life and his amazing family, and just be all round charming. He was in London for the day to pick up a passport so he could whisk his wife away on holiday, and he just made me smile the way he was so smitten with her. He ended up leaving after about half an hour, and when he left he took my hand and kissed it, telling me it's so beautiful to see a young woman in love. I never caught his name, but I'll always remember him. When I get old I'm going to do this. I was 13 and waiting for a taxi. It was raining and I had no umbrella, so I got soaked. This guy next to me sheltered me from the rain with his umbrella. We talked while waiting for the taxi and he was so easy and fun to talk to. Note, I was a shy kid with few friends, so this was a unique event. After about 15 minutes another guy came up on his scooter. My guy told him that I was a friend of his and if he could drop me to my destination. So yeah, I just climbed on this stranger's scooter and took the lift home. Perhaps that was dumb looking back on it. Anyway, I still think of this guy and the kindness he showed me to this day, even though I don't even know his name or remember his face. I had arrived a few days before in Seoul, in South Korea, and was chilling in my hostel dorm one evening around dinner time. A Korean girl walked into our dorm dressed in a pink ball gown. and gave us all cartons of strawberry milk. She then sang a little song in Korean and left. None of my dorm mates or hostel staff knew who she was. I still have no idea what the heck she was doing, but the strawberry milk was pretty good. After I had broken up with my ex of 4 years, I was looking for a new place to live. I was viewing this place and got there a bit early. The current tenant was still there. We small talked a bit. I didn't mention anything about my heartache. As she left, she hugged me and said, "I can tell you are being very brave right now." That's really sweet. Hope you're doing well now. A stranger gave me $300, no strings attached. I met him and his wife in Oklahoma City while on a road trip across country alone. I was seated near them at a restaurant bar. Didn't ask for any money and don't even know his name, but he rules. Was pretty drunk one night, out at the bars with a couple friends. We were walking to the next pub, and I hear some guy across the street. Don't remember what he was saying though. I pipe up and yell, "You talking crap?" and he responds, "Yeah, I'm talking crap." I start walking across the street with my arms stretched wide, like bring it on. I hear my friends behind me telling me to stop and asking what I was doing. The stranger walks towards me too, and when we get up close we both just go in for a huge hug. Never met the dude before, and honestly I'm surprised I didn't get punched. I'll always remember that. This is what Mr. Rogers would have wanted from us. When I was at Disneyland a few years ago, a woman approached me out of the blue in the middle of Main St. and asked if I'd like to dance. I obliged her, and we spent the next few minutes chatting while her friends filmed us dancing. It turns out it was her birthday and she was traversing the park on a birthday scavenger hunt, and one of the items on the list was to dance with a stranger. I wished her a happy birthday, we said our goodbyes, and went our separate ways. I never even got her name, but it still makes me smile when I think about it. AWW, you're a good stranger. NYC bar. I was on a first date and there was an old guy at the bar. Looked like an old fisherman from a novel, and he was convinced my date and I were already married. He went on and on about it. We said we weren't married and he told us we were meant to be together and would be married a long time. He talked with us for a good 15 minutes about this. My date and I did get married about a year later and have been together almost 25 years now. I'm pretty sure your husband time traveled back to that night as his future self. I was in the British Museum last year, looking at the Egyptian exhibit. This absolutely gorgeous woman and I nearly collided. We stared at each other for a long moment, and then spent 5 minutes gushing at one another about each other's style makeup. I was completely flustered. I've never had anyone that attractive compliment me. Late to the party, but I have one. And I have some backstory so you can understand the desperation and despair I was feeling when it happened. TLDR. An amazing angel of a human gifted me a flight from Denver to Pittsburgh because she saw how much my boyfriend had just beat me up. I had an extremely abusive boyfriend for way too many years. The first time he hurt me, he dragged me by my ankles across the gravel and rocks out of the bed of his truck I was taking a nap in. Middle of the night, we were camping. We were across the country from where all of my friends and family were, so bleeding all over and upset I demanded he take me to the airport and buy me a ticket home or I would call the police. I got to the airport. He gave me $100 and took off. I immediately went to the bathroom and cleaned myself up as best as possible so I wouldn't draw attention to myself. Then I went around trying to find any flight to my home state as soon and as cheap as possible. The last ticketing counter I went to, with no possible options at the others, told me it would be $400 something and the flight left in 3 hours. I just started bawling my eyes out. AMD, the sweet woman said something along the lines of, "What's wrong, honey? Are you okay?" I showed her my busted up palms that were filled with gravel and cut open and explained what happened. She told me to hang on a second, ended up gifting me a flight with one of her buddy passes or whatever they're called. She was so kind, I will never forget how Amazon she was. She even said don't go getting too drunk with that $100 before the flight and get kicked off. I went on Southwest's website and figured out how to tell them about their employees or whatever you would call it and told them how amazing she was. Margot from Southwest at the Denver International Airport. If you ever see this, I wanna thank you again for being so incredible to me that day. I was in the US Navy at the time and we pulled into port in Norway. We had a couple days to explore and I went to the closest city, Bergen. While in the main square area of town just down the road from their fish market there was a small boy, maybe 3 years old, and his father. The boy had a large red balloon but it was windy and it got away from him. His father made a grab for it and missed but obviously couldn't run after it and leave his kid. It was blowing generally in my direction and I made a quick dash for it and managed to catch it out of the air before it blew away. I then crouched down and held it out for the boy. He looked like he was about to start crying but immediately brightened up with the kind happiness only a child can have. He took the balloon and his father just gave me a small smile and a nod. I returned the smile and nod and we went on our way. This moment always sticks out to me. The dad basically gave you a hug and gave you the highest compliment ever. Just in Norwegian. The small smile and the nod is like the thing in Norway. Last year I got to go on vacation in Hawaii. During our last day there we went to a restaurant right across the street from our hotel and sat outside and enjoyed some drinks and some really great live music from a musician who I sadly can't remember the name of. The dude sounded like Jack Johnson but looked like Jason Momoa. No joke, he was talented as heck too. Anyway, right before our drinks arrive the musician comes back from a short break and sits down to play some more. Seconds after sitting down this huge tree branch falls right where he had been standing during his break. The musician and I locked eyes and then we both started laughing. My wife was actually embarrassed but I didn't care. Not sure if anyone else saw what happened because no one moved or said anything other than the musician and I. He said something like, "And that's the second time music saved my life, ladies and gentlemen." Was waiting for the subway like train when a woman, 40s, approached me, 20s F, and asked if she could talk to me. I thought it might be a scam or she might be crazy, but it turned out she was just really upset and needed someone to talk to. She was having a really tough time. Her kids had been taken away and I forget all the details now, but she basically just poured out her story to me while we waited and while we rode into town. I held one of her hands in both of mine. I asked a few questions, but mostly I just listened, because there was simply no resolution to her situation. It was just awful. I probably listened for a total of 20-30 minutes. Even while I was caring listening, I'd been wondering how does this end, but when we got to the center of town, she thanked me for listening and got off the train. Some of the other riders made eye contact with me, knowing what we'd been through as we listened, but none of us spoke. It was silent and a profound experience for me, and for a few others who overheard. Whenever I think of her, I hope she's doing well, but I'll never know. Went to a cafe, small place, but popular. I got a coffee and looked around for seats. None. I then notice an elderly lady sitting by a table. I ask if I can sit down with her. She gladly says yes. We chat a bit and it was also lovely. After a while she had to leave though. Never catched her name or anything. I love that so much. I like small talk if I will never see the person again. I know it bothers some people though. At graduation in high school, I was the only kid isolated from everyone due to extreme social phobia, and one guy came up to me and told me that he knew I always had a problem with people and he was the only person who signed my yearbook. I never knew him, but that was a really neat gesture and I wished I knew him years ago instead of the graduation. My boyfriend and I were on a road trip in the deep south. We had a tent and could not find a camping park that would take us. We ended up driving around looking for a rural place to crash, and along the way we saw a family having dinner on their outdoor patio. We pulled over and asked where the closest park was and the homeowner said, "Oh, what the heck. Camp on our front yard." We ended up spending the night, having a campfire and chatting about life and love. I'll never forget that night and the hospitality of the South. I was the only person in a Starbucks with one other customer, an older disheveled guy who asked me about the logo on my shirt. It was my company name. Asked me what the name meant and I said it didn't mean anything. In my head I'm thinking, ugh, I don't want to talk to anyone right now, but to be friendly I told him we had to make sure the name didn't mean anything in lots of languages because we found out our first choice was a bad word in Cantonese. Old dude goes on to tell me the whole story of how Exxon got its name, which had a similar story. first choice meant stalled car in Japanese, so they had to start over. This goes on for several minutes while I wait for my coffee. I'm playing along but thinking in my head he's making it all up just to entertain himself. I googled it later and he was exactly right. Almost like he memorized the story word for word to prepare for the conversation. Blow my mind how he had this perfect random anecdote, dropped it on me, then bailed. I'll never forget it. My favorite person is autistic, but exactly like this. Just filled to the brim with facts. They're not always relevant, but when they are, they're hella spot on. Everyone thinks she talks too much, but I love hearing what is going to come out of her brain next. Hurricane Harvey was about to hit Houston, so I was sent to Walmart to grab a few things that we had forgotten. Family of 5 with 5 dogs. Storm was already bringing heavy rain and wind. Saw this older lady, probably in her upper 70s, soaking wet with a cart of groceries, walking looking for her car. If you've been to Walmart on a full day, you know how it may be difficult to find your car worse in a storm. So I went to her, showed her my medical student, and offered to drive her around to look for her car. I loaded up her groceries in my car and we drove around. It was just 9 minutes of searching before I put her groceries in her car and she left. I pray to God, even though I will always try to be available to help my mom, if she was ever in that situation someone would offer to help. You say just 9 minutes, but 9 minutes in just moderate rainfall is a long time, let alone in the build-up of a hurricane. And it would have taken her even longer if no one had helped her. That was super decent of you. I was on a train ride from NYC to DC to visit my uncle. I sat next to an old timer on the train. We didn't really talk much since I was so young and kind of shy. Eventually this one other dude on the train started bothering everyone. Of all things, trying to convince us that Mike Tyson was innocent of that rape he committed. This dude was bizarre. Eventually, old timer told him to frick off and leave us alone. After that we started shooting the crap a little bit more. We reached his stop first, and before he left he gave me a little pin and told me to keep it. It was a pin from the US Army 1st Cavalry Division. I figure he must have been a Vietnam vet and wanted to pass it down to someone. I still have that pin. Went to a sumo match in Japan. Sat next to this super cute older couple. Had some small talk before the matches and shared some snacks we brought from another region in Japan. Halftime comes around and he and his wife come back with a commemorative mug to gift me. He also has a matching one and tells me so that we remember this moment. We shared beers and stories the rest of the day. I'll never see the couple again, but I'll never forget such a delightful moment. That mug is my favorite mug. Crazy that a 10-minute small talk session turned into a lifetime memory. Reminds you that life is amazing. I was at an Amon Amarth concert. I was only 14 at the time, so my dad had accompanied me to play bodyguard. A super duper drunk guy had the same galoch shirt on that I did, and he hugged me when he saw it. As a youngish girl, I was a little freaked out, and my dad yelled at him, but he turned out to be pretty friendly and backed off. His friend ran up and apologized profusely, then took him back to the bar. Miss you, a galoch guy. It wasn't a bad hug. When I was a teenager I was walking down a popular street to like a Walgreens or something. A guy around my age was sitting outside of my favorite little hole in the wall sushi spot with a skateboard. As I walked by he asked if I could buy him sushi. I told him to wait for me. I had to run to grab something, then I'd come get sushi with him. I walked to Walgreens, completely flustered, did whatever I had to do, then walked back and got us both sushi rolls. We sat outside. He told me he wasn't expecting anyone to actually buy him sushi just by asking, and I admitted I surprised myself too. We had a totally pleasant meal together, then I went home. Went to a pretty big high school. I was a fairly talented swimmer, got good grades, kept my head down. Final day of senior year, everyone runs through the halls and throws their papers and books around, covering the floors with trash. All my friends did it except me. I stayed after a little to thank my teachers, and on my way out, I run into another senior, a really tall guy named Carlo. He played basketball and we never interacted, never had the same classes. He randomly says to me, I don't know why people do this. They know Tucker, school janitor, got a fricked up back and they still throw their crap on the ground. So Carlo and I just walk out of the school together, picking up as much trash as we could. His tall butt could hold a lot more than me, until we got to the exit. I never spoke to him again. Still kind of wish somehow we could have made all the trash disappear for Tucker, but it was a cool moment. Boyfriend and I broke up in airport as I was getting ready to go home. It was a long distance relationship. He didn't see me cry. I went through security and then to the bathroom. That's when I started to cry. A lady in there hugged me. She'd apparently seen the goodbye and said it was going to be okay. She promised. She was the sweetest lady. I just felt like she was right. What I didn't know was that my boyfriend was sitting in his car crying. We're married now. Probably not the most memorable, but most recent. Dude and I using the urinal at Target. Mandatory man spacing of course. You might think a man's guard is down while doing his thing, but nope. Out of my peripheral I see a woman holding herself rushing into the bathroom, glance at us, shrug and go into the stall. Dude must have saw the same thing because we broke code, made eye contact and just raised our eyebrows at each other. Went back to our business and never spoke a word. Ladies' restroom must have had a long line and she couldn't wait. I'll share the Cliff Notes version since it sounds so unreal. Years ago I walked to a bridge with intention killing myself by jumping off. Met a guy there who wouldn't stop hovering around me. Eventually he approaches me and tells me that I have bad spirits around me and that I should keep my head up and not give in to them. He asks if he can smudge me. I didn't know what that was but agreed anyway. He pulls out sage, a lighter and a shell from his backpack and proceeds to bless me right there. As soon as he finishes, a bunch of birds, seagulls, crows and pigeons all come flying over and fly in circles above us. He said that they were telling me my life was about to turn around and then he said goodbye and left. My life did change that day, big time. And when my mind occasionally creeps back to dark places, I think of him and it pulls me back. I'm glad that your condition has improved, and that you have a way to keep the dark thoughts at bay. Stay strong. I was about 10 years old and I had a pair of Heelys and they were the coolest freaking thing on the earth. I would roll all over on those things and thought I was hot crap. We were in China, spending a few weeks in Beijing. I was rolling around in Tiananmen Square, hit a crack and lost one of the wheels. I looked around for about an hour, but to no avail. I was probably visibly bummed, as my Heelys, the things that made me hot crap, were now ineffective and basically ruined. The next morning, I was walking through the square on the way to meet my friends, and an older gentleman ran up to me and stopped me. He had found my wheel. He said that he had seen me rolling around and saw me looking for the wheel after I fell. He saw that I gave up and stuck around for another hour to keep looking after I left. He came there the next morning with no expectation that I'd pass through, but wanted to be there just in case. I'm not sure who was happier, me that I got my wheel back or him because he didn't think he'd see me in literally the world's busiest square. I said thank you and that was about it. We both had places to be and that was that. I was in a car accident when I was in my early 20s, living in a town where I didn't know many people and didn't have any family. The ambulance officer who attended checked me out and I told him I was fine, but he said he would wait a while to be sure. Once the initial adrenaline started to wear off, I started getting terrible neck pain and he gave me this goofy grin and told me I told you so. It was a small town and understaffed hospital, so he came in with me, stayed and assisted the nurses while they x-rayed, joked around and kept me distracted through the whole experience so I didn't stress. A few summers ago, some friends and I were driving home after a usual late night grocery store run to get some Sour Patch Kids. We had pulled up to a red light, windows down, snacking on some SPKs when another car pulls up next to us. We look over. It's a couple of dudes also enjoying their summer night. The driver looks over at us, checks out the candy situation in our car and gives me a nod. We both know what's up. I lean out the window and toss a single Sour Patch Kid across a lane of traffic right into this dude's open mouth. No celebration, no hoopla, nothing. Just one more nod before the light turns green and we go our separate ways. I found a rock formation that looked like a dong and balls in a cave in Vietnam. I laughed and pointed at it. Some Chinese tourists started doing the same thing and then some Russian tourists followed suit. Great bonding because no matter what, phallic shaped objects are funny. Pioneers used to ride these babies for miles. A kid around the same age as myself came up to me in the airport and asked if I was also playing Pokemon. After confirming that I was, he asked if I needed a golem and said that he needed an Alakazam. I did. We traded Pokemons and then traded back. Thankfully I had my wire with me, said thank you and went our own ways. I was finally getting to go on a vacation after graduating nursing school to see my best friend. I had my pharmacology book with me trying to study for my license exam a couple of days after I got back from my trip, and the lady that happened to sit next to me on the plane worked for a pharmaceutical research company. We had the best conversation, and she was excited to explain some of the more difficult drugs I was studying and little tricks to remember side effects and onset and peak times. It was by far the best flight I'd ever been on, and she wished me luck on my exam, which I passed. I had just worked up the nerve to ask out the girl of my dreams. Took me almost a year, and she turned me down. Needless to say, I was very sad. A few days later, Mopey Olmi is at work, being a mope, at a fast food restaurant. Halfway through my shift, a mom, dad, and guessing a 6-ish-year-old girl come into the store. The girl marches right up to the counter I'm at, hops up using her arms, and says hello, sunshine. All of my mope went away. It was just such a random, adorable moment that I couldn't be sad. I gave her free cookies. Hubby and I were clubbing one night, many moons ago. We stepped outside so hubby could have a smoke, and I spotted a girl sat on the curb next to our car, crying. I asked if she was okay, and she explained that she'd arrived with her friends, but when they tried to get into the club, she discovered she'd forgotten her ID. All her friends ditched her and went into the club anyway, leaving her alone. We ended up driving her across town to pick up her ID from her boyfriend's place. Then we took her and her boyfriend back to the club. When we got back to the club, we were talking with them for a bit and somehow managed to lock our keys in the car. The boyfriend managed to bend the door back enough that we could slip an arm in and unlock it, before popping the door back into place with no outward signs anything had been done to it. We didn't ask too many questions about how he knew to do that, but it did really help us out. He was glad to repay the favor. If my friends ditched me outside a club, they'd no longer be my friends. Seriously, what a bunch of turds. Hubby and I were in Munich at the Hofbräuhaus and the band was playing. I loved a polka, but hubby wasn't having it, so he suggested I find someone else to dance with. At that moment I locked eyes with a patron at another table, and through hand gestures and facial expressions I somehow managed to find a dance partner. For reference, me, tall, white, middle-aged American woman. Dance partner, petite, Korean, college-age girl. This is wonderful. One time on an almost full plane after boarding, a stranger and I realized we're both sitting between two vacant seats, and we looked each other in the eyes and just smiled of joy. I was on a 12-hour flight and realized I had the 3 middle seats to myself. In barely over 5 feet, I laid across those seats and took a glorious nap. Best flight ever. A few years ago on a train station at night, a homeless guy came and asked if I had some money to spare, and I knew that I had but couldn't find it, so I went through the bag telling him some cash was supposed to be in there somewhere, and he seemed a bit embarrassed, going, "No, it's fine. If you don't have anything on you, it's fine." "I'm not like that," I replied, "but I am like that," and eventually found it. He sat down and we had a little chat. He showed some photos from when he was younger and talked about his life. Everything gets so twisted once you're true to yourself. And when we said bye, he told me I seemed like a cool guy and wished me a happy life. I'm usually not too keen on talking to stranger just like that because I get uncomfortable, not because I don't appreciate a friendly conversation. But this one flowed, and I think we both left the conversation in a better mood. I walked into a laundromat and a stranger said hi. I smiled and said hello, put my laundry in the washers and sat to read. The stranger, Victor, turned to me and said, "So, how is 2014 going to be different for you?" Unsure about spilling my guts to this stranger, I laughed and said, "I have no idea. What about you?" "I'm going to, not procrastinate. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do more. I really want to help people this year. I love that. I don't do it enough. People are so caught up in their own lives. They never even say hi, how are you to strangers anymore, just to be nice. And when you do, people just give you this look. Why can't we just be friendly? I saw this guy moving into one of these trailers and his 9-year-old daughter was struggling to help him move a washer into the house. I was on my way to the store but I stopped and said, "Hey, can I help you? How about you go inside and I'll stay out here and help you get it in the door." See, I didn't want him to think I was trying to rob him or anything. He just looked like he was struggling and all these people just kept walking by. They just walked right past him. Why? We come into this world with nothing and that is how we leave. What difference do we make? We're just dust in the wind, aren't we? What I'm saying is we have to live our lives. Life is short, and it's all about love. Love, 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 love. Just love people. Be slow to speak and quick to listen. People will tell you what is in their heart, even if it's not what they're saying. You just have to listen. Victor and I sat and talked for nearly 2 hours. My laundry took 40 minutes. It's funny how the most unexpected people can say exactly what you need to hear, and listen when you just need to speak. Let's try to be more like Victor. Do more, help others, say hi, live your life, love, 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 and listen. I was at the park riding my bike when I approached a random kid shooting hoops. He was about 12 or 13. If I can make a full court shot. He says you might not make it but go ahead. Needless to say I freaking make it in one try and we both start jumping with excitement. I then got back to bike and headed home. I pass through the park weekly, but I haven't seen that kid ever since. This was 2015. I was in Paris getting on the Eurostar back to London, traveling for work. I took my seat then proceeded to put my bag in the overhead compartment as well as my suit jacket. I always constantly check for my passport and tickets whilst traveling so I went to make sure I had them. Nothing in my pockets. Must have left them in my jacket. So I got up to look but they were not in there either. I really started to panic. Just as I was pulling my bag down to check in there, I heard lots of giggling behind from many passengers and turned around to see one old gentleman waving my passport and ticket at me. I was so relieved to have found Gemond and started to thank him but he stopped me and admitted as soon as I got up when I first took my seat. He spotted the ticket and passport on the seat and thought it would be entertaining to hide them. He made quite a show of it for the other nearby passengers to see and everyone was just sitting there waiting for me to notice. Hence why they were all giggling. It really broke the ice and everybody around us were chatting and getting to know each other after and it made for a very wholesome train journey. When we arrived, about 6 different people asked me if I have my passport whilst laughing. It was a funny journey. You're a good sport. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.